Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I'm your lead analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined as always by managing editor Ross Binder. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, drop a like, drop a comment. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we know a lot of you listen on Apple Podcasts, but you haven't left that rate and review yet. That does help us out a lot, really, folks. Super easy to do. All you got to do is scroll to the bottom, hit 5 stars, preferably 5 stars anyway. Leave your comment and go from there. It does help us out a lot and helps push the podcast. So we appreciate it. As always, something happening in Iowa sports, particularly with football. It's the same thing as the Liddell Bet situation, Ross. We're sitting here on a Monday, and then oh, didn't see that coming. Warren Ruggiero is hired as Iowa's senior offensive analyst after 11 years with Wake Forest, 15 years under Dave Clawson, head coach there for Wake Forest. Prior to that, it was at Bowling Green, but had a ton of success as their offensive coordinator there at Wake Forest. Kind of dipped towards the end. Dave Clawson resigns, and then Warren Ruggiero, looking for a job, finds himself in Iowa City. And he had some major successes at Wake Forest, completely rewrote the record book, nearly 400 school records, made Wake Forest relevant, super innovative on the offensive side. It's hard to make a program like that a competitor, like a top 25 team. In 2021, they went 11-3. Sam Hartman I mean, it's a big reason you know Sam Hartman's name in the first place, right? Like now he's with, I believe, the Washington Commanders, or he was. And Ruggiero, I mean, he's done a lot in his career.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you mentioned it before, but Wake Forest has historically not been a very successful football team, not one where there's a lot of, passing records going down or anything notable happening. And under him, that did happen. Like their passing game was really excellent. Like you said, he shattered the record books there, had a ton of success. Sam Hartman was when they had their best years. They were a top 25 program. He got some all ACC consideration, and yeah, I mean that you have to take some notice anytime kind of a kind of a historic afterthought, which is not totally fair to Wake, but also not really inaccurate to Wake. Um, when they have success like that, it's just kind of outside the norm. You want to, pay attention to that. And Ruggiero was a big part of that success they had. So, yeah, definitely a surprising hire. Like you said, nobody didn't start the week thinking, oh, I was going to add a offensive analyst this week. And then lo and behold, we get the word that, they are adding one. And it's not just some dude. Like it is a extremely qualified former offensive coordinator with a ton of experience.
Yeah. Regarding Wake Forest and their standing, it's a low tier Power Four program. Like
Yeah,
that's just what it is. And it's like it's not the equivalent of like Vanderbilt, because Vanderbilt's awful, but it's
yeah.
a program that hasn't had a lot of success, and Ruggiero was a key part in taking them to that next level. An Art Broyles Award finalist in 2021 with what they did. I mean, looking at what they accomplished. Let's see. I want to make sure. Yeah, I'm going to read this paragraph from our free article on Hawkeye Beacon regarding the hiring. 2021, Ruggiero's run to a near Broyles win. Wake Forest scored a program best 574 points and averaged a school record 41 points per game. That point total ranks 43rd in modern FBS history and was the fourth most in ACC history. During that same 2021 campaign, the Deacons dropped 35 points in 12 games. In the college football playoff era, Wake Forest is one of 7 teams to accomplish that feat. Those 7 teams, Ross: 2014 Oregon, 2018 Alabama, 2018 Oklahoma, 2019 Alabama, 2019 LSU, 2019 LSU, arguably the greatest team of all time, 2020 Alabama.
Yeah, I mean the thing that stands out to me is I think all of those other teams were in the actual college football playoffs. So, I mean, Wake didn't obviously get that far. Probably some defensive deficiencies holding them back, but not the offensive side of the ball. The offensive side of the ball was humming for those, especially that season.
The slow mesh is what Ruggiero is really well known for. I put out the tweet that I could confirm the initial report, and the ANF guys, ANF podcast, quoted it with highlights from their matchup with Clemson in 2022, and they just slow meshed Clemson to death, scored a ton of points on a Clemson defense that just doesn't allow a lot. I mean, that whether they're ups or they're downs, they're just traditionally a really good defense with a lot of really good players, and they scored 45 points in that game, took them to double overtime. So this is a really interesting, maybe new layer to the Shanahan offense. I mean, I don't necessarily see Ruggiero being brought in to completely revolutionize what Tim Lester's trying to do. Like I would be shocked if that happened, especially in in a program that has traditionally been, maybe not traditionally, but recently, within the last 20 years, been known to have bad offense. Is that fair?
That's 100% fair, and
Okay.
I think by Iowa standards, like going out to get a guy like Ruggiero is a like again, by Iowa standards is a pretty aggressive move to try and help the passing game, which as you noted was not good last year. You know, there was a lot of overall progress on the offense, but it was almost all in the running game and, from the improvements made by the offensive line. And we've said before, Caleb Johnson was excellent, had a phenomenal season, and he had some good help too from Jazz and Kamari Moulton, a few other guys.
And the
So
offensive line.
and
Offensive
the,
line
right, and the
was
offensive line paving the way for all those guys was really much improved. But the passing numbers were basically flat from the year before, which were already like worst in the FBS level, like down there with the option academies or the military academies who are running option attacks and not really trying to throw the ball. So yeah, I mean, Ruggiero is not like a comfortable hire for Ferentz. Like this is a hire where you're trying to get some new ideas and inject some life into that passing game. This is not same old to me at all. We're not happy with the passing game, and we're actually willing to look outside of our comfort zone and outside of the box for some options and some potential ideas.
I've referenced John Budmeyer and his hire as an analyst a couple times when we've been talking since the hire last night. And why I have is because he was brought in as an analyst before he was a receivers coach, right?
Yep.
And the Iowa program, the people around the program were acting as though, and some fans were like, this is going to be what takes us past being awful. And Budmeyer, I think, I don't mean this to be shade at Budmeyer. This is just a completely different hire. Like
Yeah.
Ruggiero had a historically good offense, made a program that was, again, low tier relevant because of what they were able to do offensively, made it a NFL quarterback effectively in Sam Hartman, and had some other ACC honorees. This is just another level. This is going and getting a guy who has been there, done that, and saying, we want to learn from you, not you're new and on the come up and you can maybe.
Yep.
So, and I think what you said, Ross, there is important and something that I wrote about in our premium article, the three thoughts regarding the hiring is Tim Lester is not a sit on his hands and hope things change kind of guy. He is a kind of guy that is going to go out and make things happen and push things forward. I mean, and I think the perfect example, other than this, before this, is the complete turnover of the quarterback room. The longest tenured quarterback at Iowa right now is Brendan Sullivan.
Who was not on the roster this time a year ago.
No, he was not. Exactly. So I mean that's one, two, that's five quarterbacks gone in the matter of a year. Deacon Hill, Tommy Paholski, Marco Linez, Cade McNamara, James Reese are gone. And now you've got Brennan Sullivan, Mark Gronowski, Hank Brown, Jimmy Sullivan, and Jackson Stratton, and soon to be Fitzgerald out of Ryan Fitzgerald out of the Chicago area as a preferred walk on. Completely revamped quarterback room, and you've got three guys who have starting experience, four guys who have starting experience now, in Sullivan, Hank Brown, Stratton, and Gronowski. So, very, very, you'd probably prefer that Stratton never had that opportunity, considering
And
the health of the team last year. But,
yeah,
um, this is this is just the latest example to me that Lester is not a guy who's going to sit around and hope things gets better. He's going to go out and make things happen. And I'm not saying that Lester was like, we have to hire this guy. This had to go through Kirk, right? But
I think they saw the opportunity though, and they're like, "Hey, this could be a really good thing for us." And I think it's also, speaking of Ferentz, like this is him another sign that this is the thing that we've wondered since Lester was hired. How much power does he have over the offense to make it his own, to mold it, to control it, and how much control is Ferentz still exerting? I think this hire is another sign that Lester does have a pretty solid amount of autonomy in running the offense because on the surface, Ruggiero does not scream Ferentz hire, at all. Like, and that's not a knock on him or Ferentz or anything. It's just he's very different. He doesn't fit what Iowa has done on offense over the last, 20 odd years. But like you said, Iowa on offense, especially within the last, 5 years or so, has trended towards being, mediocre to just flat out bad on offense. And I think Ferentz, to his credit, has realized that and is like, okay, the things that I wanted to do on offense or that we were doing on offense, just not being successful. We cannot fight against that reality and not acknowledge that truth. And he's doing that by hiring guys like Tim Lester, empowering them to remake the offense, and now hiring somebody like Ruggiero, and it seems like letting him and Lester work on fixing the passing game. And these are, like I said, by Iowa standards, pretty huge transformative moves because this is a program that for years and years, the offense is the offense, and we tinker with it, and we make some little changes around the edges and on the outside, but the core fundamentals of the offense do not change. I think we're starting to see some more change to some of those fundamentals and to just the overall look and feel of the offense,
or you're Brian Ferentz and say we're going to do the same things, we're just going to do them better.
which came from Kirk. Let's be
Yeah,
real.
right.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
Brian
Oh man.
Brian was the messenger for that unfortunate message.
That was one of my first press conferences that we were, credentialed for and everything. And I was, what?
I mean, and the extra insane thing about that statement was that just can't work when everybody else already knows exactly what you're going to be doing, and you don't have the superior talent to like everybody knows what we're going to do, but it doesn't matter because we're rolling out an NFL caliber offense or something. It's like, sorry, that's not happening in Iowa City. So
No.
you better not be running an offense that everybody knows. The fans can in the stands can say, I know exactly what they're going to call there. I know, here comes a short run to the left or something. It's like you just cannot be that predictable. And
I can't tell you the amount of times Dallas Jones, one of our friends in the media, who will be moving to Phoenix here shortly, put it out on Twitter. We'll miss you, Dallas. I talked to him at this last basketball game. Uh, would say outside zone. What is it? Outside zone. Okay. We don't need to make this a shit on Brian Ferentz podcast. Even though we could make every single piece of content that. But so what this does, and I think it's the most important thing is the passing game, right? Like it's everything you said, Ross. All those numbers effectively flat. They did improve, but a lot of them were still in the triple digits in terms of rankings. So going out and getting this, and th that's another thing. I mentioned the health of the team last year, health of the quarterback room. They could have said, yeah, and we brought in Gronowski, and we brought in Hank Brown. Like, chances are we're going to improve, but no, like we're not looking to just improve. We're looking to be competitive. We're looking to shoot up those rankings. So I like this move also because of the change to the analyst role. The NCAA changed that analysts are able to participate in practice, be on the field, stuff like that. So you're effectively getting a second quarterback coach, a second offensive coordinator, because he's been doing it for 15 years. He's been with a ton of programs. And, Lester wouldn't hire this guy if he didn't want to have some wisdom imparted on him and on the offense. And I think it's good timing too, because it's before spring ball. It's not
Yes.
after spring ball.
Yes.
On that note, Clausen resigned December 14th of this last season. Frankly, I'm shocked that Ruggiero didn't get picked up by somebody as an
Yeah.
offensive coordinator
Yeah.
or a quarterback's coach or something.
Yep.
Or, this senior offensive analyst, this comes in March. Nobody went out and got him and said, "Hey, we'll pay you
Yeah.
XYZ numbers to come in and help us out." So for him to end up at Iowa is just I think it's a stroke of luck, but it's also an indication of Lester and Ferentz and their unwillingness to sit on their hands. So I don't know how I don't know how you look at this and say, oh, whatever. Other than the fact that, Iowa's made moves before and not a whole lot has happened. So yeah, I understand that maybe trepidation, um, a wait and see mentality. But I don't know. You can't be negative about this hire, right? You can't be negative
Yeah.
about it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's totally understandable if people want to, wait and see. The proof is in the pudding. Wait, see what happens in the fall. See what the production is like for the quarterbacks. If the schemes look different, if the routes look different, et cetera, if the timing is improved, et cetera. Lots of things that we'll be able to see in the fall of what the actual level of improvement is. But just at this point, in the spring, going out and making a move like this is to me just a tremendously positive move because it's a sign that, like you said, they're not sitting on their hands and trusting that, oh, we're just another year more experience in this system, another year with better health, just adding Gronowski, just they're not trusting that that stuff alone is gonna, improve the passing game. Hey, we have an opportunity to get this guy, get him in, get his input into the passing game and the offense, and hopefully, not just improve the passing game, but maybe significantly improve it and really take it from being, you know, a liability to a strength even. I mean, that's crazy to think about at Iowa, but at least to the point where it can be,
Let's slow
let's
down, Russ.
let's slow our roll. Let's slow our roll. Right. Yeah. At least get it to a point where you know, it's complementary football, right? Where the passing game can legitimately complement the running game and it's not just, being dragged along by the running game or whatever. So yeah, I think we'll wait, the final receipts will come in on this move in the fall for sure. But for right now, for something that none of us had any idea was happening 24 hours ago, it's a really positive move and a really exciting move in my book.
The last thing I'll add to that, in talking about specifically the timing of it, is Mark Gronowski isn't going to be able to participate for a little while. And now you have him, you have Tim Lester, you have Keller Christ, all on your roster, all guys that can work with him outside of the field, watching film, etc. And on top of, Brent, he's going to be competing with Brendan Sullivan, but Brendan Sullivan is not the type to, you know, clutch information and hold it and keep it away from somebody he's competing with. He's going to have Hank Brown, who's also learning the offense. So I just, Iowa doesn't have that type of culture, right? That
No.
type of, I, well, I can think of a certain individual who strikes me as such, but, but we'll see. We'll see how that all shakes out. And, I just big fan of this hire. I don't know how you can't be. So on to some now former Hawkeyes competing in the NFL Combine, looking at who helped their stock, who maybe hurt their stock, who maybe stayed flat. out of the combine this last week and into the weekend. To me, Ross, I think the number one guy that you look at and say, he's one that helped his stock. To me, it's Luke Lachey. I mean, he didn't compete in the 40-yard dash, right? But didn't necessarily have to. You've got the tight end U reputation. He's 6'6", 250, hand size 10 inches. Like, I mean, vertical jump 35 inches, which is impressive. I look at what he did over the weekend, assuming how his interviews went phenomenally just because of who Luke Lachey is as a person. One thing that Scott Docterman always says is nicest guy I've ever covered. He and Meg Gustafson, two of the nicest people, and I'm right there. I mean, Luke. It's tough to walk away from a conversation with Luke and not think that's a good guy. That's a good dude. So I have to imagine his interviews went really well. And I mean, he performed well. I think his stock is up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he was probably one of the guy of these Iowa guys at the combine who needed it the most. And simply because the the on-field results just weren't there for him this year, or I mean last year they weren't there either. Obviously that was because of the just horrible injury he had early in the season that just derailed it. um this year I think everyone had such high hopes for him to bounce back and have a really, big season. And, for whatever reason, going back to what we just talked about with the passing game struggling, it just didn't happen for Lachey on the field, unfortunately, which again, super unfortunate. But I think there were probably some question marks about him. And his ability as a result of that. So I think he did need to have a good showing at the combine. And like you said, I think he did a really good job. So uh, I think that's gonna help answer some of those questions for sure.
I think you nailed it. He didn't have the production that he wanted. Didn't even catch a touchdown pass last season. Um, so I think some of that has to do with Caleb Johnson just being Caleb Johnson. The ineffectiveness of the passing game, right? The change in the scheme. There were a couple times where it was schemed up, the ball was schemed up to go to him, and Cade McNamara threw an interception. I'm thinking Iowa State. Um, so I this was an awesome opportunity for him to just show his physical tools, and the reputation of tight end U just carries him a little bit further, and who he is as a person carries him a little bit further. I have to think his stock, maybe not, he's not going to be a second or third round pick, probably, just because of that lack of production, but
Yeah.
he's probably gone from maybe seventh round to maybe sixth round, fifth round. And if you're a program that needs a tight end, you look at Luke Lachey and you're in those latter parts of the draft, or maybe you need a second tight end or a third tight end. Um, you say, why the hell not? Why wouldn't we take this guy?
Yeah. I
You
mean,
can.
yeah, I think if you're satisfied with his medicals, and you should be, like there's no indication that he's not fully recovered, from that horrible ankle injury from 2 years ago, then yeah, I think there's no reason not to, want to give him a chance in the NFL because yeah, the production hasn't been there, but like you said, there were a lot of factors that were working against him. And, prior to that injury, he was on pace for an absolutely, just astronomical season for a tight end in 2023. Like he was ripping it up. And that ability is still there. He is fully recovered, like I said. So yeah, I think he's going to be a day three pick. Maybe he can hopefully sneak into the fourth or fifth round. I think that'd be awesome. But yeah, I think he definitely improved his stock this week from, being that lower day three pick to, hopefully being one of the guys who gets his name called sooner on day three, I think.
Another name that I think is notable that we have to talk about out of the combine before are you a hard stop at 10? Got to get you out of here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. One name we have to talk about before we hit the women real quick, I think is Jay Higgins, because some folks on Twitter were just going nuts about his 40 time, about some of the other measurables. Then he does the three cone drill, and It's in 7.01 seconds, which is the fastest out of every linebacker that was there. And with some players, you just have to cut on the tape, right? Like this isn't hard. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. And he doesn't have to be your starting Mike linebacker in year one, right? He's not going to be a first round pick like Jack Campbell was because he's not that type of physical freak. But this is a player that you go, he's going to help us out day one. And he might not be your starter, but he's going to help you out on special teams. He's going to help you out in certain packages. Jay will do what he needs to do to see the field and have an impact on the field. And this is a guy you straight up don't pass on. Like you need a linebacker in rounds 5 and 6. Yes, call in. I wish we would have called this in yesterday. Like you go get Jay Higgins.
Absolutely. Jay Higgins he's just a football player, and he was a really, really effective football player at Iowa the last few years. Some of the measurables maybe weren't there, to the extent that you'd hope. He's not a guy like Jack Campbell that, he had the film and he crushed the combine. He was, just an absolute, win-win. No, and that's why he went in the first round. It's not rocket science here. There are some, a few deficiencies on Higgins, the height and some of the measurables. So, that's why he's not going to go in the first round or even the first 3 rounds or, anything. But he's still an extremely productive football player, a guy who, like you said, is going to make an impact on your team, a positive impact, no matter what. Like when you get him in there, like he's going to be, just a demon on special teams. He's going to be great in certain packages. And yeah, I don't think this is not a pick that you want to overthink much. Like Jay Higgins is a guy who will absolutely help your football team. So yeah, don't think too hard about that one.
Exactly. I think those are the two major storylines out of the combine. But then you look at Caleb Johnson running a 4.5. I don't think he vaulted himself into the first round with that.
No.
To me, he's clear RB3 in a class that's pretty deep. But he's probably going to go second round. And that's another one where you kind of cut on the tape and you just say, I think he's probably faster than 4.5, or at least he has the playmaking ability to compensate for it, right? Just
Yeah.
a dude that's tough to tackle. So he should go in the second round, in my opinion. I think Connor Colby helped himself out this weekend as well. Probably not going to be, he's going to be a day 3 pick, right? But at the same time, I think he did help himself out. Maybe moved himself up, maybe half around. But a positive win. A guy who started at right tackle, that project clearly didn't work. Moved him to right guard, and he was great there for the Hawkeyes. So that's a big positive. Anything else we need to talk about regarding the combine, Ross, before we? No?
I don't think so. We got a lot more time to talk about the draft and stuff. So
Right. There you go. Well, women's basketball, the Big Ten tournament starts tomorrow. Iowa taking on Wisconsin once again, back-to-back games. They're in Indy as they're taking on the Badgers for the second time in a row. Really handled them in the second half at home on Sunday. Gonna
yeah,
expect them to
tie
do it again.
high game at half,
Right.
36.
But
Iowa opens up the third quarter with back-to-back 3-pointers,
right.
and immediately gets up 9 and really doesn't look back from there. I don't think that it ever got closer than 5 or 6 points after that, and it was double digits for a good chunk of the second half. So
I also think it being tied at half, though, I mean, it's a first half, right? Like you don't need to take a ton away from that. But it's senior day. Emotions are high. Like
yep,
Sida Folter is gone. Lucy Olson's like those are Kylie Fearback but hasn't made her decision yet whether she's coming back or not. But Addie O'Grady's gone. This senior class has been really impactful. Been around for a lot of winning. Um, Sida Folter has just been so huge with this program. It can't be easy to come out and have a really impactful game right away until you get into the flow of the game, get focused on the game, etc. And Sida Folter got into some foul trouble as well. She had 3 fouls at one point. So, um, I I'm not too worried about that first half. I think they'll go in and blow out Wisconsin in that first game again. Then they'll play Michigan State, and did play Michigan State earlier on this season. Fell to the Spartans 68-66 on the road. That was in December, so it's been a hot sec. These are two very different teams since then. In that game, Hannah Stolke led with 18 points. Lucy Olson was 4 of 17 in that game in 37 minutes. I don't see that happening again. So my assumption would be that they at least make it past those first two rounds and then take on
Yeah,
probably Ohio State, like you said.
yeah, yeah. Ohio State is the three seed in their part of the bracket, so that's who they would, face if they get past Michigan State, and presuming Ohio State doesn't get upset by. No, actually, they can't get upset. I think they've got a double bye, so they're locked into the quarters. So they will be there
Okay.
waiting. Um, Yeah, that Michigan State game, weird one back in December. Like Iowa had a bunch of chances, couldn't get shots to fall. Lucy Olson, especially, shooting like not even 25% from the field. Just a super off day for her. It's a weird thing. Like Iowa is playing as well as arguably anyone in the Big Ten to end the season. Like maybe outside of like USC or something, who's going to be a one seed and everything, and won the regular season, etc. But like Iowa into the year 8-2, just in phenomenal form. Really looking good. They fell to the 11 seed, which it's just kind of the way things worked out. And with obviously, it was just the tiebreakers. They were in a four-team tiebreaker at 10-8 in the Big Ten, and the tiebreakers did not favor them because they happened to be tied with a bunch of teams that they lost to. When they were in that kind of five-game losing streak they had, so they just did not favor them at all. But this is not, the 11th best team in the Big Ten by any means. Like this is a team much closer to being one of like probably the five best teams in the Big Ten, especially on current form, than like the 11th, which is pretty below average Big Ten team. So yeah, I think this is a path with some real opportunity. Like you said, Wisconsin is not a it's a weird team. When you play a team twice in a row, that's just kind of weird. But it's not a team you're super scared of for sure. Michigan State is a game that, they had every chance to win back in December. Now they're playing a lot better on a neutral court too. That game was in East Lansing. So, that should help a little bit. Iowa should have, a really solid amount of fan support. The tournament's out in Indianapolis. Iowa fans always travel well. Gotta think probably going to be some Fever fans that show up too that are going to be back in the Hawkeyes. That Caitlin factor couldn't hurt. So I think that's good. And Ohio State, they took the Buckeyes to overtime in Columbus a couple of weeks ago. Tremendous game. So Buckeyes very good team, obviously deserving of their top four seed, but Hawkeyes have been really good the last 2 months and capable of playing with anybody in the Big Ten, as they've shown. They're the only two losses they had were that OT loss to the Buckeyes, and then a loss basically almost at the buzzer or last few seconds to UCLA, who was second in the Big Ten. So, team with a lot of confidence, a really good form. It's going to be exciting to see how far they can take this run in Indianapolis. They've had a ton of success in this tournament. Three-time defending champions. The crazy thing is, like, I don't know that anybody playing in this tournament other than the Iowa girls has experienced what it's like to win the tournament. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody left from whoever that was that won it when Caitlin was a freshman. But yeah, it's just Iowa has owned this tournament. Obviously, long odds to do it again this year. They got to win 5 games in 5 days. That's hard. No Caitlin Clark. Duh. That's a big factor. But this is a team that can definitely make some noise in this tournament, and I can put a run together, I think.
It's just you look at some of these teams that Iowa has played and beaten pretty handily, and you're like, Iowa's the 11th seed.
Yeah.
They've just hit their stride at the right time.
Yep.
And yeah, you were right. Ohio State has the double bye, which that's just got to be so nice to be able to chill those first 2 days.
Yeah.
But and Iowa's got a pretty favorable spot in the Big Ten tournament, all things considered. Maybe you'd prefer to be that 12, 13 seed, win that game, play Michigan, play Maryland in the double bye as opposed to Ohio State. But I mean, it's better than facing UCLA. It's better than facing USC. They took
Absolutely.
UCLA also to the wire at home, but they almost beat Ohio State on the road. So this is a
Yep.
neutral court. Um, so, and like you said, Iowa fans travel well. They probably travel better than Ohio State women's basketball fans.
Yeah.
So, we shall see how that shakes out. That game will be later in the day, tomorrow. Game one is at 3:30 on Peacock, and that's Minnesota, Washington, followed by Rutgers, Nebraska, game two. And then game three, 25 minutes after game two. So might be around for a little while. That'll probably be a 7, 8 p.m. Central tip, maybe 8:30. So gonna be a late night tomorrow for Iowa fans, but should be a win and an opportunity to move forward in the Big Ten tournament to play in Michigan State the following day. So we will have coverage at Hawkeye Beacon for all of the things that we talked about today. Of course, we have the results from the NFL Combine, premium and free article on Warren Ruggiero, the hiring of the senior offensive analyst, and Big Ten tournament starting tomorrow for the women. Men taking on Michigan State at home on Thursday. That's going to be a tough one, and we will have coverage of that as well. So become a premium subscriber today if you're not already. Iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. We will wrap it up here. We appreciate you tuning in to this episode of HawkCast. Don't forget, drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know what you're thinking about the Big Ten tournament, about the Combine, bringing in Warren Ruggiero. Are you neutral? Are you positive? Where are you at? Are you one of those people that's negative?
Save space. Let us know.
Yeah, let us know. Drop it in the comments. And of course, like I said, Apple Podcast listeners, Spotify listeners, we know we got a lot of you. Leave that rate and review. We appreciate it a lot, rather. So, once again, folks, I am Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by managing editor Ross Binder. For now, we will see you next time.